The Rings of Power Season 2 is about to come out, and as the marketing campaign amplifies, reaction YouTubers are already sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for the shit to hit the fan. But that's not why I'm here today. Instead, let's rewind some of the first season, taking a little dip in visual storytelling and seeing if the creators of this series actually did something right. But before we dive in, please consider subscribing. We are only getting started and your support means a lot to me. Thanks! And now, let's get to the point. I have seen the first season of this show, and I did not like it, let's just get that out of the way. But one aspect of it did catch my attention, and that was the set of Númenor. This is the first time we see Númenor on the screen after being given a stable idea in The Lord of the Rings on how the Men's Kingdom generally looks like in this universe, and boy is the resemblance uncanny. But if we leave the landscape shots and go a little bit closer, we realize that actually Númenor differs from Gondor a lot. If you look at this landscape, for example, and start to go into the details, you can quickly realize that it is indeed all over the place. More on that later. But in a general sense, it looks like it's trying to convey some late antique and Byzantine-esque aesthetics. And this becomes all the more obvious when we get to see the outfit of Queen Regent Miriel, especially her jewelries. Actually, it was her jewelries that first caught my attention. Looking at this outfit, the headpiece and the large brooch on her shoulder reminds me of pieces of the so-called Gisela treasure, a large set of 11th century Byzantine jewelries. The armbands are also common in Byzantine fashion around the same period, worn by men and women alike, and the little hanging things on her belt, similar to those hanging from her crown in other scenes, are called pendilia and are a common element of both men's and women's fashion in Byzance. Not addressing the absolute pile of lore inaccuracies with her or the incredibly cheap looking and out of place feeling of the rest of the costumes, we will take a look into whether or not her and Númenor's Byzantine allures are done right, from choosing the style to its execution. But why is this important? Nothing is new under the sun, and especially with fantasy, we have to create and present worlds that never existed in reality, yet they have their distinct characteristics, history and place on the scale of general good to bad that the viewer should be able to pick up on. In a movie or TV show, the creators can work with a vast material of existing art from all around the world and history, and by adding some elements that are taken from real sources, not only do they make the fantastical scene more convincing, but they also invoke the audience's pre-existing knowledge about the thing they have incorporated. Thus, we the viewers can make up our minds about what we see on the screen without them having to take extra time and effort to explain that thing to us. Going back to the landscape scene, its very obvious resemblance to Minas Tirith already suggests this place and Gondor being related, unconsciously setting the context even for those who aren't deep enough in Middle-earth lore to know exactly how and why. On the second look, the prominence of golden domes catches our attention, referring to the ancient glory of Constantinople. The white marble walls, and especially the blue paintings splintered on them, have already directed our association towards Greece, so now the viewer may expect to be introduced to a kingdom that has historical and political characteristics of Byzantium, including a prediction of an inevitable downfall. But is this comparison strong enough or serves well what the creators wanted to say here? Given that Tolkien himself has pulled a lot of details from real history and mythology to build up the history of Middle-earth, if we find his sources and reach back to that on the visual level too, it shouldn't be too hard to build a lore-accurate version of settings to tell any deranged fanfiction we want to tell in this universe. Anyways, back to Númenor. We learn more about its history and downfall in the Book of the Silmarillion. We know that it was built by the Valar as a gift for the loyal men, made to resemble Valinor and the lands of the elves, that Númenorians were superior to other mankind, and during the ages, Númenor became a harbinger of culture, developing a vast library of history and all kinds of knowledges. Being on an island, they were also masters of sea and ships, and were known to regularly go to Middle-earth and bring the gifts of civilization to the other people there, who respected and worshipped them as demigods. Eventually, Númenorians started to get displeased with their mortality and demanded to be invited to Valinor, which the Valars declined repeatedly. Their hubris then grew to a point where they turned against the Valar, which invoked division among them as well. They started to build big halls for their dead, and the cult of death and possible resurrection rose in prominence. At this point, their empire was more than 2000 years old. They started to colonize the lands, engaged in a hedonist culture, and dressed in silver and gold. Eventually, their rulership turned into despotism. Pharazôn brought Sauron into court, and he started to cause confusion and deceptions, convincing the Númenóreans to worship Melkor and persecute those who did not participate in this madness. Eventually, even the weather changed for the worse. A lightning destroyed the dome of Melkor's temple, and when Pharazôn finally attacked Valinor with a fleet of ships, a volcano erupted in Númenor, and the seas have opened, and the fleet of ships along the entire island has sunk forever. The closest parallel to this is the description of Atlantis provided by the Greek philosopher Plato. In his iteration, the political structure of the island resembled that of the Persians, and its downfall was indeed caused by their hubris and disobeying their gods. Although there are still a lot of debate going on regarding the actual place and culture of Atlantis, sadly not exempt from baseless theories and occult myths, it is widely accepted that the eruption of the Thera volcano on the Mediterranean Sea that consequently wiped out the Minoan culture of Creta could serve as an inspiration for this story that, for Plato, served much rather as a political allegory than as an actual record from history. So now, returning to our initial question of visual storytelling, if we were to stick closely to Tolkien's lore, we actually didn't have much to work with, visually speaking. We do know how the Cretan culture looked like, but we know almost nothing about their history, and as per Persians, given that The Lord of the Rings and all the mythology on its perimeter was written by a British person based on European folklore that holds Byzantium as its eastmost border, are quite frankly just too far east to provide visual references for a country that is located on the far west from a European perspective. So what we have left with is, trying to think with the heads of the creators here, a glorious empire, having to do something with Greece to include the Thera eruption and or underlying knowledge about Atlantis, marching towards an inevitable downfall. In the first season, they did not seem to address the antagonism between the men of Númenor and the Valar, apart from some weak attempts of "we don't like your kind here." Instead, they concentrated on the rigid and inflexible nature of power in Númenor, making it even easier to draw a parallel between that and Byzantium. A not insignificant element to the visual design is that they had to refer to Gondor somehow to maintain at least some continuity between the two productions, and that being close to Romanesque-era North Italian style, going for Byzantium in the visuals instead of some ancient, lesser-known culture helped to seal the gap between the two fictional cultures and further helped grounding Númenor in the viewer's visual knowledge of both actual culture and Tolkien's lore. That's about the big picture. Of course, the moment we get closer to the sets in street scenes, for example, the entire concept falls apart completely. There are modern wooden structures in the background, the architectural ornaments are all over the place, and don't even get me started on how horrible the costumes look. The fact that the creators had to embed both Gondor and Elven design in this ultimately Mediterranean setting doesn't help much either. And the saying "devil is in the details" exists for a reason, because even though generally speaking the concept of bringing in Byzantium to represent what the creators were trying to say here would not be bad in itself, the execution of it still makes it look cheap, lazy and manipulative, relying on deceiving the viewer instead of actually putting effort and thought into the design. After all, they only had $1 billion to make this one season. It only makes sense that they couldn't spend much on those pesky little details, right? All in all, do I think that they did this right? Well, there was an attempt, I guess. Do I like the results? No, not in the slightest. And as for the second season, actually, I'm kinda looking forward to it. Actually, I did like the trailer, and I am probably going to at least hate watch it. I mean, they obviously chose the best shots here, but they still don't seem to be able to develop beyond the 15 horsemen versus 20 orcs looks, which is kinda hilarious. It looks kinda okay though. It gives an idea that they are actually trying to stick more to the lore with Sauron deceiving Númenóreans, which is good. Sauron's new look is awful though, and who the hell are these guys? But for this video, this is all I wanted to say. Please press like if you liked it and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm planning to talk more about real-life art history, especially regarding the European Middle Ages here, but if you want to see more dives into entertainment, please tell me in the comments along with your thoughts on this topic. Did Did you like the first season? Are you looking forward to the second one? And generally, what did you think about the settings, the visuals? And with that, I wish you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to have you on the next video. Bye!